excited to introduce our speaker for today, Harvey Levin. Harvey is a member of the class of 1975, and he first returned.
But I don't look a day over.
Right. You just can't believe it. So he first returned to the law school 3 years ago. One of my first guests here as dean, and it was a truly extraordinary visit. I think he said many things that were just very insightful and very moving to many of us. And so whenever that happens, we just think, boy, we got to bring this guy back. And I think that you're going to find that Harvey has had a tremendously very interesting and unusual career. Many of you know him as the founder of the celebrity news site TMZ.com, as well as the television program that is named with the same name. In fact, I just watched it 2 nights ago, I should say, and he wasn't on it, so I got very concerned. And he said it's because he was out of town, so it's still safe to watch. He also, I have him on my TiVo. I happened to watch, I think right after I saw you either for dinner or the last time you were here, you then did a duo with Paul Anka. So for all of you who want to hear Harvey, he actually has quite a nice voice. Maybe if we had the music on, if Aaron could get us the music, he could sing it. But just go on Google and put in Harvey Levin and My Way.
Later. Not now.
Yeah, not now. That's a good. We can actually play it.
No.
We will not. I should have thought about that. But let's talk a little bit about some of the things that Harvey has done other than TMZ. So he got his BA in political science from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and then graduated from this law school in 1975. And after graduating, Harvey taught for a year at the University of Miami under Soya Menchikoff. Soya Menchikoff, as hopefully all of you know, is a legendary law school professor, our professor, whose portrait is hanging in the Great Hall. And Harvey had her, and then when she took a bunch of people when she became dean at the University of Miami to teach, and Harvey was one of those people. And then he practiced law for a time, and then he reported on law in Los Angeles. I think that was probably your first time breaking into sort of media, entertainment and media, although I'm not sure you would call it entertainment, although it really was, the O.J. Simpson trial, right? So I don't know how many of you remember it, I don't know how many are old enough to remember, he provided a lot of the commentary on that. Then he joined the People's Court, which again may be a show that you only distantly remember. He was host of that series in 1998. That was an amazing show because it brought lots of other shows. Judge Judy wouldn't exist without the People's Court. You name it wouldn't exist without the People's Court. So he then was a creator and executive producer for Celebrity Justice, and then went on to TMZ in 2005. So Harvey's going to talk today about a number of subjects, but one of the things that I think makes this a particularly timely talk is, as all of you know, we launched the Business Leadership Program, the Doctoroff Business Leadership Program, recently, actually last week. And Harvey was someone who I talked with on visits to Los Angeles about the program, about what we should include in the program. And I know he gave me very valuable information about that because Harvey is one of our alumni who has gone on to become a tremendous business leader. And I'm just really excited to stop talking and to let you hear Harvey Levin.
So somebody told me, I had forgotten about this, but the University of Chicago magazine, somebody came out and interviewed me a couple of months ago, and somebody said, did you read the story? I went to dinner last night with my law school roommate, and I hadn't seen it. So somebody faxed it to me today, and I read it. And there were 2 things in there that made my life discernibly better from what it actually was. They never made reference to the fact that I practiced law, and they said that I lived in downtown Chicago, which would have been awesome. So yesterday I had breakfast with Jeff Stone, who I just love, and was a huge, huge influence on my life. He was an inspiring guy. And you know the way, you don't know yet, but eventually you'll know when you come back here from time to time, that a professor will say to you, oh, yeah, I remember you. You were really great in evidence, or you were really curious in con law, or whatever. Jeff Stone, I haven't seen Jeff Stone in a long, long time. Jeff Stone met me at the elevator of my hotel, and what he remembered was he walked up to me and he said, remember when you were on that game show High Rollers? And that's the story that he remembers. Great. You know, I said that Jeff was a huge influence on me. It is emotional for me to be here. And I can't really describe this, but I give a fair number of speeches, and I give the speeches and I go away, and that's it. And when I came here 3 years ago, it was emotional for me to be here. And it took me a long time to kind of process it and figure out why. But this place changed my life in ways that I never would have dreamed of while I was here. It never occurred to me. I mean, I came here because I wanted to be a lawyer. And I, struggled like everybody else, and, learned and read and talked and argued. And I thought it was all for preparing for law school. And at least in my life, it wasn't that, or for being a lawyer, but for my life, it wasn't that at all. Law school has had an enormous impact on everything I've done outside of law. And I was talking to Jeff about this yesterday, and it's funny because I think lawyers who practice law or teach law don't really understand the significance of what they've learned beyond just the law, but the art of advocacy and the art of critical thinking, that they don't really appreciate it because everybody they deal with is a lawyer. So everybody kind of is in the same game, and they kind of, they play from the same playbook. And it doesn't really strike you as much. When you're outside of law, when you're in business, or when you're doing something creative outside of the legal profession, suddenly you look around and you realize what an unbelievable advantage you have by having learned the art of critical thinking, by learning advocacy. And ultimately, and I know this is going to sound weird and maybe even a little demeaning to what we do, but the art of salesmanship. And that's what this place did for me. I have not spent an hour in my business life where I haven't used what I learned here. And I mean that. I haven't spent a single hour. That the critical thinking that you learn here stays with you, and you apply it to everything you do. There was a guy 2 years ahead of me in law school, and I remember he said to me, when you listen to the radio, you're going to pick apart news stories, and you will hear things differently. And I'll never forget it. His name was Don Parker, and every time I hear something on the radio, a news story, I think of Don, and I do that. I pick it apart. But it has stayed with me and become more and more meaningful as time goes on. I'm keenly aware of this place, and I think that's why it was so emotional for me to come back. I'm keenly aware of what this did for me. And I know it just sounds like words right now, and you're probably thinking, oh, God, this is such bullshit. I have to read 100 pages this week. But I'm telling you, what you will learn from this experience beyond law is invaluable. And I say, you learn the art of salesmanship. Everybody, I think, is a salesman. The funny thing is, your dean is a fabulous salesman. He is a fabulous salesman. He is a great face for this law school. He is somebody who gets out there and he sells. He's a salesman. I'm a salesman. We sell different things, but we're both salesmen. And advocacy teaches you how to be a good salesman. It teaches you how to be strategic. It teaches you, I mean, I just left a meeting where I'm trying to sell one of my television shows to a big station group. And I walked into that meeting and there was a beginning and a middle and an end for me. And I knew where I wanted to go. I knew what I wanted to hit. I knew how I wanted to build. I knew how I wanted to end. And I thought that through. And it's the strategy of selling that you learn as a result of being a good advocate. And you know, it served me well an hour ago. It was a good meeting. And that's the thing that has just stuck with me and been so invaluable for me. So what I want to talk about, you know, look, I'm not going to talk to you about, Dick Badger said to me, do you guys cover, are you covering the NSA thing on your show? And I said, you know, the closest we've come to that is NWA. No, we're not covering NSA. But, you know, I'm not going to pretend to, you know, teach you something about constitutional law or the right of privacy or anything like that. What I want to do is just spend a little bit of time telling you how I helped build my business and how I used my legal training to do it. Because this is a fungible commodity. You can use it anywhere, not just in law, but as you go through life, there may be opportunities that you're not even thinking of now that present themselves, and then all of a sudden you think, huh, I could go for that brass ring. I could try that. And it's amazing how this tool can be so useful in opportunities that come your way. And even though you think you're going to Wall Street or you're going to public service or whatever else, God knows what you're going to do in 10 years. You just don't know. So what I want to do is just spend a little bit of time. I'd like to tell you how I started TMZ and the thought process that went through it, if you're game. I mean, because I thought that it would just be an example of how you use something, but that's all I've got right now is that example. So I thought I'd kind of give you a little history of how we built this business and how my legal training really helped. So I created a show called Celebrity Justice. And I loved this show. It was basically about celebrities in the legal system. And I put this great staff together with these great people. And it was a syndicated television show, and it ran for 3 years. And we broke a lot of stories on this show. But it was really frustrating because we had crappy time periods. And you know, I think in Chicago it was on at 1 in the morning, and in LA it was on at 12:30 at night, and you know, we just had really lousy time periods. And what would happen is we would break stories, but they wouldn't hold. So what we'd have to do is we'd call CNN or MSNBC or Fox up and say, look, we have this great story, let us break it on your show. So we'd break it on their show, and by the time it was on our show, it was old news, and it was our story. It was really frustrating. So 3 years in, we realized we couldn't make a business of it. And my company, TMZ, is owned by Warner Brothers. So the head of the television division called me up one day before they canceled the show, and he said, you know, we're going to start a website. How would you like to start a website with us? And what I realized was that the die was cast with Celebrity Justice when he asked me that. And so I said, screw you. Because I was upset that he was canceling my show. And I said, I have no interest in starting a website. And the idea was basically, taking all the red carpet interviews that the company amassed, and only bits and pieces would be shown in various television shows, so we could show more red carpet. And I thought, I want to see less of that. So why would we want to start something where you see more of something? So I said no, and I went away, and I was about to make a deal with a television network to produce shows, because I was a TV guy by then. And I went to Mexico, and this is 2 months later, and I was in kind of a margarita haze, and it just was so simple. I was just thinking, and I was thinking, what would make a website successful? And I started thinking, you know what? My problem was time periods. That I had all these stories and we had this great news operation, but we couldn't make a business of it because we were saddled by these terrible time periods. And then I thought, wait a minute, why can't you have a news operation online? I mean, there were no news operations online at the time in 2005. I mean, it was real hit and miss. I mean, it could be true, it could be false, it was 50-50. And nobody really had a news op. And so I thought, if you actually set up a news operation where you have the same rigors of any other news operation, and I had worked at NBC and CBS and the LA Times, so I knew how news operations work, and Celebrity Justice had a good one. I thought, you know, we'll get researchers and lawyers and producers and we'll staff this up like a news operation. But it made so much sense to me. I thought, everybody's got computers, and so if we can get things right, we're not going to be saddled by time period. We're not going to be saddled by publishing cycles like a newspaper or a magazine. And then I thought, well, when you get it right, you just get it up. And I thought, how do you not win that? And it just seemed so obvious to me. There was this huge void. And it was that simple. And I remember thinking, I can't wait to sober up. Because if this makes sense when I'm sober, that it does now, this is going to be really interesting. And it made sense. And it was really that simple. And I thought, there is a void in the marketplace, and we can fill that void. So I called the guy at Warner Brothers back, and I said, look, if you're really interested in doing something online, I don't want to do red carpet stuff. I want to set up a news operation. So if you're ready to do this, I would do this. And, you know, then we had a 6-month struggle, and they said yes, but they still wanted all this other stuff, and I didn't want to do the other stuff because I felt that, you know, you can be mediocre at 10 things, which is what they wanted. They wanted, you know, radio and TV and entertainment and all this stuff covered. And I just thought, no, let's take a niche that nobody's really covering, because the way entertainment worked up to that point was publicists ran Hollywood, and they could call a television show and say, hey, if you want an interview with Tom Cruise, do this story, even if the story wasn't true. And they would do it. And they would gladly do it. And magazines would do it, and it was the dirty little secret of Hollywood that publicists ran, they ran the city. They ran the industry. And it was dangling that carrot. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to get into that, and I thought, again, why not do honest stories? There are so many of those stories out there, and we had a taste of them in Celebrity Justice. We'll just do honest stories, and we won't do any interviews. So then we just shifted the balance of power, because I was thinking, wait a minute, if we don't do interviews, the balance of power completely shifts over to us, because the publicists can't dangle anything. So we thought, we'll call the publicists and we'll say to them, look, we're going to do true stories, and they will be accurate and they will be fair, and we will work with you. And you try us once, and if we screw you and we're not honest about who we are, you will do a lot more damage to us than we will to you, because you'll get a bad story for 2 weeks and you'll put us out of business. And you'll end up putting us out of business because of bad word of mouth. So I have way more to lose than you. Trust me. And I literally did trust me. And it worked. And one by one, we started winning them over. And even when it was a bad story, we would call them up and say, look, we will give you the best bad story you can get. And because somebody else is not going to call you and get your side. Somebody else is going to make stuff up. Somebody else is going to skew it just to get a good headline out of it. We'll be honest with you. Give us your best. We'll give us a bad story, and we'll give you the best bad one. It'll be fair, but it will be the best you can expect. And it's become a thing with us now, that we have people calling us with bad stories. And, you know, because they know the way the world is now, if it's going to get out, they give it to us. And we kind of created that network. So that was the premise of TMZ. And then the other premise was this, is that, you know, I started thinking about the web, and our partner at the time was AOL. We no longer have AOL. Well, they've changed now, but it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And I've stopped drinking. It was terrible. So they said to me, okay, we're going to set this up so that you have writers. And you have, and they wanted to get this building, and it looked like a newspaper building. And I thought, they're writing. And it's like, why would you write? Why would you write when now the internet has video and photos and interactivity and all this stuff? And then I thought, you know what? We're just going to do this so we have not writers, but producers. Everybody should be a producer. Nobody should be a writer. You produce on the web the way you produce on television. So rather than just writing a bunch of text, you know, let's get producers and we'll hire kids and we'll train them so that, you know, you look at something and you say, okay, well, this is a video-driven story, so you want to tease people into the video. You don't want to tell the whole story, so you write a modest amount of text to tease people in, and then you have a photo gallery to supplement, and you can have a poll, and you can, you know, you produce each post and you make it a richer experience. So those were kind of the tools we were armed with, and it worked. I mean, it just worked. And so we kind of established it, and then we thought to ourselves, so how do you brand this thing? Because, you know, it's one thing that you have something that works, and then the issue is marketing, right? So how do you market a website when nobody ever did a website before that was news? So our plan was that we would brand it off the backs of every other media outlet around that would not view us as competition, but view us as a curiosity. Because we were this little tiny group, 20 people, and we were in the upstairs of some industrial building in Glendale, and they thought we were cute. And so they did. I mean, they did. And so we, from the first day, I mean, we started getting stories. And I remember the first story we got was a, I can't remember, actually I don't remember the subject, but CNN was interested. So they called us up and they said, we like this story. So we'd like to put you on and talk about this story on CNN. And we said, great. And they said, well, who are your sources? And we said, well, we're not going to tell you who our sources are. And they said, well, look, you're a website. And we need to know who your sources are because we're CNN. And so, you know, we said, screw you. But that was a plan. We actually knew this was going to happen, and that was our plan. Because what happened was, our story was right. And then the next day, CNN did the story that they could have had the day before. So they called us a couple of days later with another story that they liked, asked for our sources, went through the same drill, and again, the next day, they realized it was right. You getting the whole Pavlovian thing here? Because that was the plan all along. That over time, we figured, and it would not take a long time, that all of the news outlets that had gotten really lazy, and they were all doing pack journalism, that if we actually enterprise stories, you know, over time, if they saw that we were right, they looked bad when they wait a day. So they started calling us up and not asking for our sources. And over time, a short period of time, you know, we'd go on, we'd talk about it right after we broke it on the site, and they would say, you know, TMZ.com, TMZ.com, and our publicity kit, 4 months in, was this thick every month. I mean, it was insane, and we were keeping track of this. So this went on for 4 years, and, you know, they were doing articles on us in the New York Times and the Washington Post and saying, wow, look at this little website. And then we broke the story about Mel Gibson's anti-Semitic rant, and it was a big deal. And they still was, you know, wow, TMZ broke this story. And we did this for 4 years. And it all changed the day Michael Jackson died, when we broke that story. And when we broke that story, the LA Times 10 minutes later said they wanted to, everybody was upset because that's a story everybody wanted. We broke a story, Michael Jackson was dead. And nobody knew this. We knew it. And the LA Times 10 minutes later came out with a story saying that they have talked to a cardiologist at UCLA saying he is not dead, he's in a coma. So then the line was drawn, and people had to choose TMZ, LA Times. And suddenly, and I literally felt it within an hour, everybody in media turned on us. I mean, all these wonderful stories about TMZ, and they realized that we had eaten their lunch for 4 years, because here they branded us and branded us and branded us and branded us, and all of a sudden we were a threat to them. I mean, this was a big story, and it was funny because the media, or everybody went down, a lot of them went down the LA Times rat hole, and they ended up telling a story that was completely wrong. And so that was a turning point in media where they suddenly said, we don't like you guys. And that's been pretty much the case ever since. But we used them for 4 years to brand us. And again, it was our strategy where we thought this through on how we were going to develop and grow this business. And so I will say, law school helped me with this. I mean, it really did. I mean, I can't imagine that, you know, the training is that you think about the possible horribles. You think about the opportunities up the road, you know, and that's what I learned in law school. I mean, that's what I learned that sticks with me, that you project things 5 steps down the road, and you don't just say, oh, this is, you know, this immediate gratification is where I want to be, because everything has consequences. And that's what law school taught me. The Socratic method is that. The Socratic method is exactly that. Is where you ask somebody a question and you give me an answer, and I've set a trap for you. Okay? And then I ask you the next question and the next question, and then you realize that the first question you answered was flawed, and then you see how it's flawed because we've asked 3 more questions that take you down a path that you realize, oh wow, I shouldn't have gone down that path. That's kind of the Socratic method. Well, the Socratic method works in business. It worked in that. And that's kind of what we did there. It was a pretty simple plan, but it worked. So then we decided we were going to start a television show. Actually, we didn't decide that. My boss at Warner Brothers decided that. And I didn't want to do it because suddenly I was so into the web that I wasn't into TV anymore. And they said, oh, no, Fox wants to do this show. And so I did not want to do the show. And we were thinking, God, what do we do here? You know, if we do another Entertainment Tonight, you know, who needs a first one of those, much less a 5th one of those? and you know, and then, you know, we're not going to pretend to do TMZ.com. You know, this just in. You know, it's 6:30 at night. You know, you saw that at 11 o'clock on the website, so you're not going to play that game because it's dishonest. People are too sophisticated for that. So what the hell do you do? So then we thought, wait a minute, if we do a show that doesn't pretend to break news, but just a funny take on Hollywood, and have it complement the website. So we take the stories we do on the website, the video that we shoot for the website, but then with celebrities, and then just do a funny show, that what it would end up doing is not only carving out a niche that's different from all the other shows and branding it quickly, but that there could be this synergistic effect where we could be driving people back and forth. And that kind of became the hallmark of our business, is that whenever we launch something, you'd launch it so that the existing platforms can benefit. And so we started to think, wait a minute, we can actually create that synergy here. And, you know, and I just want to think about how I want to say this. It was important, you know, we needed to really dance on this line, because we did not want to antagonize celebrities. I mean, we wanted to have fun with them. And we thought, we want to get a young demographic here. And they were saying you can never get men on a television show involving celebrities. And we thought, bullshit. We thought this is ridiculous. Of course you can, because the other shows were exclusionary, and the other shows, you know, would, you know, when you went into some actress's closet and looked at her shoes, guys are gone, you know. And we thought, wait a minute, because our website, we programmed it so that there was a balance at any given moment. You look at the website, and my big thing is looking at the snapshot of the website, and there's got to be something important and funny and snarky and interesting, and, you know, enough for men, enough for women. And we have a 50-50 balance. And I thought, why can't we have a 50-50 balance in the show? And so we thought, we're going to do fun things that are sexy and fun and different, and things that celebrities want, because we thought if we can appeal to a young demo, they're going to come to us because they don't, look, Entertainment Tonight has 65-year-old women, and they do. I mean, that's their demo. And we thought if we can get, you know, young people watching this thing, they're coming to us because they're the ones that buy movie tickets. The people in their 20s and 30s, they're the ones that spend money. It just made sense. And so we started courting these celebrities and having fun with them. And the show worked as a result of that. And so we created the show, and the show worked well. And then we thought, okay, so what do we do next? By the way, I'm going to open this up to you guys, but I'm going to just kind of truncate this. And this is the next big one I'll tell you about, and then I'll blast through the other ones. And then we thought, okay, so we've got this television show, and it did really well from the beginning. What I was going to say is, the other thing we did in the show was, you know, Warner Brothers, and I'm not trying to rag on Warner Brothers, but it's a traditional television company. And there was a lot of pressure to get an anchor. They wanted me to be an anchor, and they wanted reporters. And I thought, no. You know, it's like, no. And, you know, and I have a great staff. And I mean, my staff is young and smart and creative. And my executive producers are amazing. And they're just so good. And we all got together and we said, let's make the newsroom the voice of the show. Let's not have reporters. Because the people in the newsroom are the ones that work on all these stories. So we know these stories, and we can talk about these stories, and we can have fun with these stories. So we made the voice of the show the newsroom, the people in the newsroom. And, you know, and we have these two voiceover guys who are hilarious. And the combination of that, without doing the traditional, you know, back to you, Harvey, you know, it just made it distinctive, and it branded it. So we went there, and then the next step was, okay, what do we do? Do we just kind of sit here and say, okay, we got two things going that are good, or do we want to make this a business? And it was a turning point for us. And do we make this a business, or do we make this what it is and just grow it? And my business partner in this, Jim Paratori, who tragically died a year and a half ago, you know, Jim used to always say, you grow or you die. And boy, was he right. It's true. I mean, nothing stays forever. I mean, everybody, when radio came along, it was like, oh my God, radio. I mean, I'm reading this book, America, Summer in 27. And it's such an interesting book because they talk about how radio was new and how people would, you know, hover around the radio and how big it was. And, you know, it's like nothing stays the same. I mean, digital is not going to be around forever. And that's kind of what I thought about, is that, you know, in 5 years, that screen there is going to be fully integrated with, you know, the internet and television, right? I mean, whatever screen you've got is going to be, obviously, I mean, it's that way today, the internet and television. Well, what do you go to the screen for? You go there for two things. You go there for entertainment and information. That's it. You go to that screen for entertainment and information, period. So, why would you have a remote control that activates television and then activates the internet when you're going to the same box? Why do you have this wall, and why is there an internet, television, why is there an internet? And it's like, the more I started thinking about it, it didn't make any sense. It's like, in 5 years, we shouldn't have television. We shouldn't have the internet. There should be a new thing. It should be a blend of the assets from broadcast, the assets from digital, and, you know, video and audio from television, and the galleries and interactivity and all of the other assets from digital, and you combine them. You pick and choose assets from both, and you create programming and information that's asset specific. And that's the way you program. Just the way with a television show, you sit there with writers and you figure out how you're going to do it and you get sets and everything else. It's the same thing. It's just now you're choosing from two different areas, and then you're taking them and you're combining them into one experience. So why should there be television in 5 years, or the internet? Why shouldn't there just be the blending of these assets that are show specific? and maybe some are going to be more heavily digital assets, and some will be more heavily television assets, but why not? So I started telling my staff about this, and they started ragging on me. And so I said, we got to have a name for it. So internally, we call it Intervision. And they tear me apart for this. And we said, okay. So we all got together and we said, so let's come up with the first show. And so we thought, let's do something that's based in our newsroom, where people can come in and be a fly on the wall. And they can be part of our room for an hour a day. And because we break a lot of stories, and we can do a lot of the stories we break. We can talk about the stories and how we argue about the stories and how we laugh about the stories and how we've, where certain stories give us pause and how we make decisions on whether to run something or not. And we can have all these discussions, and we can bring people into the room and they can watch it. But rather than just watch it, let's make them participate. So we'll bring them in through Skype and phones and Twitter and every other social media. And rather than doing it the clunky way where you say, okay, we're going to bring in somebody from Skype, we don't do it that way. Let's make this a seamless worldwide conversation where somebody from Denmark can just pop up on this screen and they become an equal participant, this egalitarian room where anybody in the world becomes a part of this thing. And obviously, we do produce it in the back. I mean, we have a little control room where the producer makes decisions on who goes up there. But when you look at the screen, it looks seamless. And the person pops up and the person starts talking. And we get people from Denmark and Dubai and Paris and Des Moines and all these places in all different forms. And it's this, and they argue with people in the room, and people in the room argue with each other. And it's this really kind of cool vibe. And so we started it on the web, and then we went to Sirius XM, and then we went to a local television station in LA, and we said, try this for 6 months, and we'll just give it to you. We'll just give it to you, and see if it works. Because it wasn't about, it's not about squeezing the last dollar you can get now. It's about, what's the business plan? What are you planning on doing? We wanted to see if this would work, and if it would work, we want to incentivize them to realize, hey, there's only upside for us. So take it. We'll give it to you for free. We'll do it ourselves. And it worked because it was different. I mean, it wasn't the same crappy talk show. And it was different and raw, and there's no director, there's no stage. It's raw, but you feel like you're there. And it was different. So it went from 1 station to 2 stations to 3 stations. And Fox picked it up on all of their owned and operated stations on September 10th, and 2 weeks later they bought it for 3 additional years because it did well, because it's different. And that's what we kind of learned from this, and we thought, wow, you can actually start something digitally, take chances, learn how to do it, make mistakes, migrate over to television, but don't do it where you're trying to make, which is what everybody does, try to make all this money up front and make the best deal and just drive them into the ground. Do it so they're invested, so they're interested. Because you know what? If you're successful after the first year, you'll do a lot better in years 2 through 10. And if you try to squeeze them in year 1, you may not get year 2. So, that we did that. And then we decided, let's start a bus tour. And we thought, we do all these great stories. And when I drive through Hollywood, I mean, we did a story about that, and then Michael Richards went crazy there. And so we started this thing called the TMZ Hollywood Tour. And it's a 2-hour show. And what we did was, and Warner Brothers, again, they didn't want to do it. And fortunately for us, the president of Warner Brothers, his first job out of college, or out of law school, he was a tour guide for Universal. And he loved the idea. So it's this 2-hour tour that's this show on wheels with 107 videos and these guides that are just amazingly entertaining. And we have now launched it in New York as well. But what we did there, where the synergy is that the guides would drive around the city. So A, it's a rolling billboard and rather than us paying for a billboard, we make money off our billboard. And so number two, celebrities would come up to the bus like animals in an African safari, because the guides have cameras, and the celebrities knew that they could get on the show if they come up to the guides. So the guides would get celebrities on camera, which adds to the content of the show, and then the guides would come into the office, they would pitch the video, which then expands our newsroom to make it more dynamic, so we have new people, and these guides have all become stars on the show, and it gives us new content, so it's that synergy again. So we built that. On Thursday, we're launching TMZ Sports, an hour show, and we're doing it the same way we did TMZ Live. We're going to do a TMZ musical, which we're just kind of like in the infancy stages of. And then finally, and then I'm going to open it up to you guys, you know, the challenge, and I hope what I'm conveying to you is that what we've done is we've looked in front of our nose, beyond it, and we've tried to establish this plan. And for me, that's what I learned from law school. It was to think into the future. And most people, for whatever reason, they just don't. They just don't. They just react. And it's really served us well. So the last thing I want to tell you about is this. For better or worse, we found Kim Kardashian. Because in 2006, she was walking into a club with Paris Hilton, and one of the guys in my office said, "Look at that ass." And they said, "We got to put this up on the site." And we put one up and another up and another up, and she became a thing. And so we decided we would try something. So we put an ad out on our website and on the television show, and we said, "Are you pissed off that the Kardashians are famous? Do you think your family has more talent than the Kardashians? Then if you do, send us a video, a 3-minute video, telling us why you think your family should be famous." We got 10,000 families, and we found a family that is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And unbelievable. They are, I'm telling you. And what we're going to do is we're going to move them to LA, and we're going to give them 12 weeks to become famous. But here's the thing about it. Here's the thing about it. So we have TMZ, which is on Fox, right? The show is on the CW. It's going to be a primetime show on the CW that starts in March. So Fox and the CW are competitors. And so the challenge right now with television is, that you guys probably know, is that it's struggling. A lot of people aren't going to television anymore. You can go on demand, you can go Hulu, you can do all sorts of things. Dorms are not putting cable in anymore. I mean, dorms aren't putting cable in anymore. The television industry is in trouble, which is one of the reasons I was talking about that box, that I think we got to start thinking that way. But television business is in trouble. And you know, the CW is great, but it's a challenge to cut through on the CW with a lot of these shows. So we thought, what are we going to do to cut through? So what we did was, we talked to the guys who run these two networks, and they're real smart guys, and said, hey, let us cross-promote. I mean, you guys have different audiences. Let TMZ be the engine for this show, and let us on TMZ give them challenges. You know, put them on the web. Make this family a thing for 12 weeks as part of our show. And let us do that, and then we'll promote the CW show. And the CW show can promote back to TMZ, because the content of the family is going to end up on the CW. So they were on board, and they said yes. And nobody's, for whatever reason, they haven't done this before, where two competing networks have done it. But they said yes, and it made so much sense that they did it. So we got them on board for that. And then we thought, what are we going to do to make this thing different? How are we going to propel it? So what we said was, let's create a social media war. And this family has all sorts of issues. I mean, I actually love them. but the mother's 43 and the father's 31, and it's a stepfather who's, the oldest stepdaughter is 25, so she's 6 years younger than him, and it's created conflict. And the 19-year-old's a virgin, and the father wants her to stay that way, but the mother thinks it's ridiculous, and on and on and on and on and on. And the grandfather is a law enforcement officer, and he's white, and he's married. The grandmother's black, and so, we thought, let's find all these blacks. Let's just create, what are all the conflicts here? And it's like, okay, should a law enforcement officer be doing a reality show? That's one. So you target all the law enforcement blogs. Religious blogs on the virginity thing. Blended families, all this stuff where there are conflicts in the family. And then we're going to drive videos and information about the family to all of these blogs. So we created a book. And we're going to reach 180 million people with these potential conflicts. And our goal is to get 1 million people who would never watch television, or certainly a CW show, to get 1 million people to watch this show. Now, we may fail, but we're going to try. But that's our goal. If we can do it, it's going to really be transformative. And we'll see. I mean, I don't know how this is going to work. I've got high hopes for it, and we're taking a chance, but that's what it's about. I mean, it's about taking chances. And believe me, I'm not saying I haven't had failures, because I've had failures. But you got to take chances. But thinking things through, and again, what I'm telling you about now, that's a work in progress. And that's the theory. Whether the plane is going to fly, I don't know. But I think it's going to fly. And I'm not in a margarita haze. So the last thing I will say to you is this. As you go through life, and especially if you go into business, I am telling you, do not forget this. You are not as smart as you think. And that, you may have the best mind, but there are different ways of looking at things. And, you can get somebody, in my case, I surround myself with a lot of young people. And TMZ would never be successful if it weren't for them. I mean, there's no way my sensibility could translate into what we do. There's no way. And they have taught me at least as much as I've learned from them. And not just about pop culture, but about the way people think today. And it's different. It is different. And there's a rhythm to the way people live today that's different. And as you go through life, don't lose touch with that. I mean, don't lose touch with that whatever you're doing. I mean, Michael will probably say the same thing about, look, he's dealing with you guys. He'll deal with a new group in 10 years. When he's 10 years older, that group's the same age. And at a point, you've got to connect. And don't lose touch. It is so important in life to transcend the world you're in and not be so insular that you socialize with the same people, you learn from the same people. It's weird, because I do think sometimes that people my age are older than me. And I think that just because I'm surrounding myself with people who make fun of how old I am, but at the same time, they're responsible for the success of this whole business. And they are. And I'm really serious about that. You're really young right now. I'm looking around the room, and I hate you all. But you won't be someday. And don't forget this. I'm telling you, don't forget it. Number one, it will keep you younger and more vibrant. But number two, it will keep you more connected. And especially if you go into business, you need that. You need that. Okay, I will open this up. Anything you guys want to talk about? I know. Did Lindsay Lohan wear underwear yesterday? Yeah.
Can you talk about some tips that you use or you tell your producers to use to leverage relationships they have to keep the content current and to keep all of your different businesses intertwined with each other?
The tips?
Any tips in terms of utilizing relationships to keep content relevant and new?
I mean, what I've found is that it becomes self-fulfilling after a while, that the reason we had an opportunity to do the television show was because we created a fresh approach with the website. And then once we created a fresh approach with the first show, people were willing to give us a chance with the second show. I mean, my business is very short-sighted. And if we fail at Famous in, oh, the show is called Famous in 12, by the way. If we fail at Famous in 12, maybe we'll have a harder time if we want to sell another reality show. I mean, I know the reality of my business, and it's kind of the way it works, that the opportunity that you have from having the ability to look into the future gets thwarted, as you don't succeed at certain things. And then you got to figure out ways around that and reinventing yourself. And that's just kind of the way it works. But it's weird. I mean, it's the way that you grow is when people say, wow, I really like that operation, but you've got to start somewhere. And the place to start is someplace creative. I'm just so positive about that. If you just copy, you can't break out. Somebody name something, I'm sure there are a couple of things, but you name something that somebody copied and it's bigger. Okay, Judge Judy. Aside from that. Yeah.
So I have a question about when I think of like other big web journalism properties like Business Insider, Huffington Post, or Bleacher Report. It's like often like a cesspool of content farming and SEO optimization. And I wonder, I don't read TMZ, I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
But I'm wondering how you feel like you've been able to escape that or bypass a lot of that, or if that's just kind of the world you have to play in to succeed on the web, or if having deep pockets when you started the company, having AOL Time Warner behind you, helped you kind of grow past that really quickly. Or
Totally
something
helped.
like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. That really helped. Yeah, I don't know that we could have succeeded without Warner Brothers and AOL. I don't think we could have. It would have been really hard. Really hard. I don't see it. Of course, we're really conscious of SEO. I mean, you have to be. I mean, that doesn't mean you ignore the conventions that work. And we're very mindful of SEO. I mean, I want to know, we have something called Omniture where we can tell how many people are on the website at any given time. We know metrics. We know, what stories they're going to. I can change a headline on a story and see a dramatic increase, in user engagement. So we're looking at that all the time. I mean, I don't want to go down a road where nobody's following us. So SEO is really important to us. There are a lot of sites that aggregate. I mean, Huffington Post, I love Ariana. I mean, I think she's a really smart person, and I think, they've aggregated, but at the same time, they have content where they have an opinion section. They've expanded a little bit, and I think Huffington Post is a great model. That's the other thing. I don't see this as a zero-sum game either. I mean, that's the funny thing about my business is that most everybody thinks of what they do as if somebody else succeeds at something, it means we lose. And I think that is such a flawed way of doing business. In my area, with TMZ, with a website, it's like if somebody else breaks a story and people get really interested, how many of you, I mean, if you're interested in whatever it is, sports or entertainment, how many of you just look at one website for something you're really interested in? You don't. You look at 10 websites, right? So if somebody else creates more interest in something and gets more people under the tent, it's going to benefit us. It's not going to hurt us. I mean, we still have to do our job, but it's like I don't look at other people and say, oh, I hope they fail. It's like there's room for plenty of people to succeed. And other people succeeding actually helps broaden the interest in the subject matter. So, Ariana has carved her own niche and has done amazingly well. I mean, I think Huffington Post is a great model. Great model, yeah.
I remember one interview that you did, yes, I watched TMZ, with Lamar Odom's roommate, who's like a lawyer.
Yeah.
And he's like doing crack or whatnot,
Yeah.
or allegedly doing crack. So I remember one part you mentioned that you were a lawyer on the show. And how do you tend to frame your questions in a way where it's like tiptoeing on the side, it's not liable if she is lying, but I remember one part you're like, did you gain the impression that he was, as opposed to make sure she wasn't incriminating herself by lying if it wasn't
I
true.
use it all the time. I mean, I'm always thinking that way. I mean, I'm always thinking about, it's funny that, one of the things you learn is worst case scenario. So you always think about, oh God, if you say this, how does this end up looking down the road? And so, yeah, we think about it all the time. With the Lamar Odom story, we had it nailed before we did that interview about what he had done. I mean, we knew what he had done, and we were 100% on it. So I was comfortable doing that interview. We had to be careful in terms of how we talked to her in terms of what she did. But in terms of Lamar Odom, we had done our own legwork on that. And, but yeah, you always think about that. You always think about that. And again, hugely valuable for what I do. Hugely valuable every hour. Yes?
For most of the young staff that you were talking about, where do you like to draw people from? Like, do they have media backgrounds? Do they have been to law school?
I look for smart people. I got to say, I mean, my staff is so eclectic, and I've hired. There is a lethargy in media that is just unbelievable, unbelievably bad. That and you know, I have a person who's a real good source of mine, and whenever we break a story, that person will get calls from various media outlets saying, "Fucking TMZ, they bought this story. They paid for this story." And this person knows not only did we not, but that maybe this person was even involved in helping us get the story. So, you know, there is an amazing lethargy in media, and we've tried bringing in more seasoned people, and it generally doesn't work. I mean, I had a meeting, this meeting that I had today was with a television guy who was saying 90% of the people in this whole business, they just write it in. And it's bizarre, and I don't understand it. But what we've done is we've hired really bright people who just learn. And then one of my executive producers was an intern on Celebrity Justice. He's now running the place with the other executive producer. I mean, running the place. And he is, his contract was up 6 months ago. Jeff Zucker from CNN was desperately trying to get him at CNN because Jeff Zucker knows he needed somebody to jumpstart them so that they would wake up. And fortunately, we were able to keep him. But, you know, we have a really eclectic but smart group. I mean, I've got a guy who runs our news desk who ran a forklift. And he became a court reporter for us. And he was running, you know, files in the courts and then showed this amazing talent. And now he's the news director. I'd put him up against any news director in the country. And he'd kick their ass. And on and on and on. So, you know, we have it's a very young group, but they all started as interns or PAs, and there was a turnover in that area. Not the TV show. The TV show's been really stable from the beginning, pretty much. But the website, which is, you know, it's really the grind. It's been young people, and they're amazing. They're amazing. Yes?
First I want to say I worked in Hollywood and I used to see the TMZ bus all the time before coming to law school. That's cool. But also...
It makes me so happy. I do U-turns when I see this bus. I do U-turns and I jump on the bus. I love the bus so much. I do.
But I was just wondering, I know you said you were going to talk to us about common law or privacy law, but sort of what's your response to the critics of TMZ who sort of feel like the model is sort of an invasion on celebrities' privacy or ability to live normal lives because they're just kind of doing their craft and they should be able to live their lives on the side without paparazzi always around, and especially for the kids a lot of the time. So what's sort of your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have been mindful of that from the very beginning, and it's an issue. And there's no hard line in the sand, but one of the things we did early on was we decided rather than using freelance independent contractors for camera crews, we put every one of our camera guys on staff so that they make the same amount of money whether they get a video or they don't get a video, which then basically disincentivizes them from crossing the line, which a lot of them do, where they start chasing people. In addition, we actually put in their contracts. They're prohibited from chasing people, they're prohibited from trespassing, they're prohibited from invading privacy, they're prohibited from inciting people, and we fired people who have violated that. So we've been really careful about that, and it's also, aside from the fact that it's wrong, it's also bad business to do that, because they will hate you. And You know, the interesting thing now is Kanye West, because I think he's done something incredibly stupid. You know, look, I mean, with kids, totally get it. But for Kanye West to go through an airport and say, don't talk to me, don't talk to anybody I know, and then to beat them up and try to take their camera, that's a bad proposition. And he's being prosecuted right now for that. And the city attorney is going to bring in 5 other examples that are on video of him doing similar things. So with that backdrop, Kanye West went on Jimmy Kimmel last week and said basically the same thing. He said, you'll love this. He said, don't come in my zoo and start pushing me around, because I will take care of business because I'm from Chicago. He actually said that. And I gotta tell you, that he's in trouble. He's in trouble. So, you know, we're really mindful of it. It's ultimately the 2 things. There's a point where it's wrong to do, and I will give you one other example that I think I used here once before. Britney Spears is under a conservatorship right now. And there was a file that was put in the conservatorship case that the person downtown who runs files for me in the courts called me up and said, I got this file, and it's crazy, and it was about her kids. And I looked at this thing, and it was like so embarrassing. And I thought, this had to be a mistake, where they should have sealed it, and somebody screwed up. So I called her lawyer up, and the lawyer flipped out and said, oh my God, the clerk didn't seal it. So the lawyer called the judge had the clerk seal it, and so that was done, except we had the only legitimate copy. I mean, we had a copy, and we tore it up because it was wrong to do. And we do it all the time. I mean, you have no idea how many stories cross our desks that we don't do. I mean, you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked. And stories that are true. So we're really mindful of it. And I'm not saying we're these Galahads, but I'm not, because look, we have to make judgments, and we try to make judgments that are ethical. I mean, we turn down a ton of stuff, but also it is bad business. And what happens is that somebody gets a video that's so tempting because they know that everybody's going to look at it, that they say, oh, we'll do this one anyway. And you can't go back from that. You just can't go back from that. Once you go down that road, you really can't come back. And that's what the staff works on. The mantra is that it's not short-term gratification. It's the long term. And the long term is the way I kind of started this thing and the way I'm ending it now, which is that's the way to think. The long term is the way to think in terms of consequences, in terms of business, in terms of developing whatever project it is, and it's what you learn here. And I'm telling you that, this is what the old fogies always say. You just can't appreciate what you're getting right now, but you really are getting something that will last you a lifetime, and it's something that's subtle, and it's something that will bubble to the surface as you go through life. So congratulations for that, because you are at the best place for it in the United States.